founder of PomPom Recycling. PomPom Recycling, PomPom as a brand is an on-call service for picking up recyclables. So the idea is that we try and promote, educate people what recycling is. We give them an option of having convenience of having it picked up. So the whole idea is that I'm trying to make the process of recycling segregation easier. You have a service where you can use the app, you can use the phone number, you can use the website, give us a call, place an order on the app, a guy comes to your house, picks up your recyclables, and pays you for it. Where do we come? Why did we get into this business? India perspective, we are the third largest generator of waste. We're generating about 188,500 tons of waste per day. Of this, about 15 to 20% is recyclable. And what's the biggest problem that we are facing right now? The waste is not being managed properly in our country. Issues with that, primarily the biggest issue is segregation of waste. So there's no segregation of waste happening, which results in wastage of resources, which is the recyclable market. There's a different perception toward waste. People think once the waste is out of their house, it's fine. Or how does a piece of plastic make a difference if it gets mixed? Or who cares? Yeah, just a small piece of pen. How does it matter? Can be recycled or not? And there's no solution available. Like today morning in Bangalore paper, Bangalore Mirror, second page, there was an article about, I think about 150 houses who were trying to segregate waste and keep it separate, but the guy who's picking it up is mixing it again. So that solution is not available in a lot of places where you can look at recycling it properly. And for recycling it properly, segregation is the most important part. What have we done? We've tried to create a value to it. So the whole idea is that if I incentivize and I give value to a customer, that there is a value to every small thing, be it an envelope, be it a pen, be it the milk packet that you open in the morning, be it the toothpaste cover that you have at home, everything is recyclable, there's a value to it. So the process is quite simple. You book us through an app, web or phone, like I said, keep it segregated. We have categories on the app, on the website. Our agent will come to your house, pick it up, weigh it for you. There are prices already there on the app. You get paid for it on the spot by cash. We take all that out of your house. We take it to our segregation center, where we then segregate to multiple different categories. So paper can be segregated to 3, 4 different types, plastic into multiple categories. We buy metal as metal, but we separate them into different kinds of metals and things like that. And then we give it to the end recyclers. What we realized when we started out, the first 15 days, all the calls, the initial traction was all about people asking paper waste. We realized that there is a big gap in terms of people knowing what is recyclable house, what can go into dry, what can be recycled. And that's in the first 15 days we realized we got to figure that out. How do we approach our customers? How do we train them in making them understand how important it is, how important recycling is, and what is recyclable? So now what we do is through flyers, through pamphlets, or whenever our recycling agents goes to anybody's house, we give them a simple one-pager guide. I'll show you the images of that later, but it's got pictures of every single item that this is what you can segregate, which can be recycled. We have tied up with a couple of embassies, corporates. We send our team there to train their housekeeping staff with the guide again, that this is how you segregate. We have done workshop in school. We're doing a lot of workshop in school because we realize with kids, it's easiest for them to explain, and they like the fact that, mommy, keep this separately, PomPom will come and collect it, and their incentive is they get that money as pocket money, which has worked really well for us. My youngest customer is a 7-year-old kid. She got a flyer, she's from Sriram School. She got a flyer from us, and then we did a workshop there, and she started recycling, looking at the flyer and understanding the value of recycling. Like I said, customers, corporate offices, hotels, schools, households, factories, malls, anybody who has recyclable and they're willing to segregate it, we're willing to buy it from them. This is the kind of collaterals we're using in terms of explaining this. Like the first one that you see there is just a very simple guide which has got pictures of all the items. People can understand what they can segregate instead of saying dry and wet. Our ads, hoardings in Delhi are Hindi and English again. These are stickers we give to corporates to put paste on their bin where you can write it's a dry waste or a wet waste, what is recycled, what is not. The kind of posters you can put in your offices. There are a lot of collaterals available on the website, which we try and tell people that start focusing on recycling, put this into everybody's head to segregate the waste. In the last 3 months, we have diverted about 280 tons of waste out of the landfill. Our youngest kid is a 7-year-old kid. We have a lot more kids who are joining us for doing it. Just a couple of facts, not related to India, but these are taken off the internet from a couple of ISWA journals and Columbia University's research. Quite interesting. 40% of material supply of global raw material, it's a 40%, recycled material is a 40% need of that. China is the world's largest importer of waste, and apparently it helps them on something called the reverse haulage. So because they import waste, the ships, when they export something, the ship comes in cheaper for them. 87% of European waste, plastic recyclable goes to China, and it does about 56% of waste recycling, plastic recycling. We're available on the app, on website.
So, how do you get this name Pom Pom? I'm very interested to know that.
It's a sound, the horn. The television Kabadiwalas had a sound. They used to have a horn and scream out Kabadiwala. Second reason, easy for people to remember. Kids remember the name. That's
Right.
all.
Judy can ask some serious questions now.
Because most of the waste, what you talked about, is basically newspaper bottles and all that, basically, right? So how does this? I don't see any e-waste there, whether it's there in your party or not. But what's the unit economics? Because in our community, we actually pay to the vendor to collect actually all these things and recycle them basically. So how does it work out for you?
Okay. First question, e-waste. For e-waste, I need to have a license. We applied for it. So there are two licenses. One is for processing of e-waste, and the another license is for collection and transportation. We applied for e-waste license. Once we have it, then you would see that on our collateral, which would mean that any customer with even a charger, a cable, anything which is end of life, Pom Pom would buy that on a fixed per kg basis. One. Coming to the point of unit of economics in these materials. Kabadiwala, Kabad business has been there for ages. It's everywhere. There is a trade that happens. Most Indian households sells paper. It's a very common thing which happens. What they don't sell is a low value item or which is not enough in weight. For example, plastic. So if you look at your paper quantity would be this much. From a house you would have maybe 2 shampoo bottles. If you had a party, a couple of pet bottles, Coke cans or whatever. Those are low in value for a house, but they have a high margin. So if you look at aluminium can, it's taken as metal, it is thrown away. That's I think about 75, 76 rupees a kg or something like that. Pet bottle is sold for 24 rupees a kg. If it's collected together from multiple houses, then it's value in that.
Yeah, actually, I'm just going to ask you the same question in a different way. That the cost of collecting, what you're doing is great. I love your brand name as well. I think what is the business model, right? Like the cost of collecting this is high. A kabadiwala makes very little. He's not valuing his time and effort, etc., except for the profit he makes. So when you go across communities and collecting, does a great job. I don't know if you're getting paid for carbon credits or whatever else, but so where is the money coming from? Are you going to get government grants? What way are you going to make like a high margin sort of capitalistic company?
So the margin ranges anywhere between 15% to maybe 400, 500% depending on the material. I buy metal at 10 bucks, right? And I get
No, so I would go back to I think what I've said that the unit economics, right? So sure, if you collect a can, maybe it's worth I don't know, few rupees. On that you make 15%, but let's say if it's worth 10 rupees, you're making 1.5 rupees. Your cost of collection is probably 40 rupees or 20 rupees or something. So I'm just trying to understand that on aggregate, if you took like waste from 8,000 households, right? What kind of money would you generate? What is your cost of collection for each of these, right? And then after that, sort of, is there even a gross margin?
Okay. We have Maruti Eco Vehicle deployed with one driver, one helper. Cost of that vehicle per day basis is 1,000 rupees on CNG running. If that vehicle collects approximately 3,000 rupees of material, it breaks even at that level. What happens is, let's take cardboard, right? You put that in a truck and it would fit about 2 tons, 2.5 tons. But if you have a backend to compact it and bale it, we can put about 8 to 9 tons in there. Same thing with PET bottle. There's baling to be done. The cap is sold separately. The bottle is sold separately. It's all about getting volume.
Yeah, but maybe, sorry to just belabor this a bit, but let's assume that you can even compact it, etc.
Yeah.
How many, like to get 9 tons of cardboard, how many houses would you have to collect from? Is that physically possible in a sort of, and then you have to separate,
On
right?
an average, it's about 300 to 400 rupees in house collection. So about maybe 10 to 12 houses a day, one vehicle should be good enough.
Okay.
Do you know something that in Tokyo there are no dustbins? I just came back from Tokyo. On the streets, you'll hardly find a dustbin. And I was very inquisitive, so I asked a lot of Japanese people, and they said that it's a very wrong sign that they expect you to carry your own trash. And there'll be one 7-Eleven where there'll be a thing where you can dump it. And the reason is, it said that you will have bad life if you leave your trash around, and there's a terrorist issue. Now we have another problem that we don't have dustbins because we don't want to have, and there's no trash can.
There is a city in Japan which has got 32 different level of segregation. 32.
Yeah. Great. Anyways, great job. Nice, like your name.
Great
So
stuff.
nothing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Jappreet. I'm one of the co-founders at Your Startups. Let me tell you more about what we do in Your Startups. We jumpstart startups by connecting them to right talent across the world. One of the biggest challenges today the world faces is there are about 850 million people who are either unemployed or underemployed. Now, that's a lot of people. Let me give you some more stats. In European Union, this problem is not only in India or Africa. In EU, it takes on an average a year for a youth to find employment. The youth unemployment is 3 times that of the adult unemployment. Now that's a very, very risky place to be in, because if the world's a younger place in most of the places and the youth don't find work, we are not in for a good place. Now, there are a lot of platforms currently. There are a lot of talent platforms. But the connection between both the sites is either clogged or very expensive. Like a LinkedIn recruiter would cost you approximately $7,000. A job post on Monster is $400 per job. Stack Overflow is $800. So there are great startups across the world. They really want some good people to work for them. And there are great individuals across the world, be it Kenya, be it India, Africa, or even in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Ukraine. We have a lot of people on a platform from Eastern Europe, Russia, and Ukraine. Some great people, but they just don't have the ability to connect to those startups. And what we thought is, let's build up a platform which can connect both of them. There are about 100 million businesses that get launched every year. Now, this is the data which we picked up from Quora, because there is no uniform stats, but the data ranges from 100 million to 200 million businesses. Less than 1% secure funding from all the people like you sitting here, less than 1%. So 99% of businesses go down. Now, increasingly, if the number of people won't find employment, they will go ahead and start doing their startups. We're seeing that happening in Greece. We're seeing that happening in Spain. Actually, Microsoft has put up one of its biggest accelerators in Spain now in Madrid. And there is a huge amount of opportunity. We want to work with startups very early on to help them connect to people who want to work with them. It's not about the labor arbitrage. It's about helping two people connect in the world and build something together. That's what we want to do. Our target is to get to about 100,000 startups in Europe, Asia, and America. We didn't put in Africa because it's still climbing up. That's the first target we put in. So we're working with a very, very large set of market. In terms of our strategy, we're a little different. We are not a product-first company. We are a community first. So our first effort, which we are building up in our business, is to build a community. Because we always believe that if we have a community of users, then we will be able to put up the right technology for them. So we started first by going out with a very, very, very minuscule technology, and we started approaching our users. We've grown tremendously. I'll talk about the traction later on. So the first thing what we want to do is build community. Something like Twitter without community is just a platform which tweets 140 characters. There may be much better products than Facebook in the market, but you just can't leave it because everybody is there. So we want to build up this community of 850 million people, and then amazingly number of startups which are coming up across the world, and connect both of them. The second thing which you're going to do is put up the infrastructure layer, which the world generally calls technology, to help them, connect with each other seamlessly in a better way. The third one is the data layer. How do you make the platform work better? How are those interactions more valuable? That's where you put in a lot of algorithms and other stuff. We started working on it, so we're building up a couple of algorithms, but it's all prioritized in terms of what. The first one is a matching algorithm, which helps these two sides connect with each other seamlessly, because again, there is a lot of noise which you transmit if you connect both of them directly. And that's where the whole recruitment market comes in, because the recruitment market is about connecting and then sorting, then selecting and interviewing, and then finally the job offer. And the last one is when the whole platform comes to work, we have minimal human interaction, and people can connect to each other and choose to work with each other across the world. This is the whole hiring value chain. Hiring globally, I don't know if you know or not, uh, it's about $400 billion plus market. It's a very, very fractured market. There are players across the value chain. Some very, very deep players. You've seen startups like HackerEarth coming in and building up. Indeed is now owned by a company called Recruit in Japan. So we are focusing primarily on the first two parts, which is this one and this one. Because if we spray, then we'll only pray. Because this is too big a fish to solve currently. We want to be the best for startups in job posting and broadcasting. The current options to startups are very, very limited globally. They have to pay a lot of money. If you go on Indeed, you have to pay approximately $2 a click now. And you don't get access to markets, and the founders really struggle. If you're going to do more of tech startups in the future, tech startups don't have great networking, they can't go. You finish your family and the friends inventory of hiring, because that's everybody. If you're from a great college, everybody is doing something or other, and they don't want to work for you. So that's a big challenge. You want to work on the first two parts. Startups don't have too much of money, and that's a reality. The little seed money which they will get, what they're going to do is, they're going to try to build the product. The last thing you want is they should go to the consultant and pay money. In India, it's still cheaper. If you were to hire someone in San Francisco, you'll pay about 15 to 20%. That's like $10,000 for a programmer. Now, that's painful. So we started our annual plan. Our annual plan started at €9. And thank you so much to people who are here. We signed up about 9 clients here itself. We were at Surge, we signed up 150 clients in 2 days. So our target is to target those 100 million startups which are going to come up, give them our base plan. So we are the hygiene factor for startup. Like you've got a business card, you've got a website, we want to do the early stage connection, which you can monetize or use later on when you're hiring. What's our go-to-market plan? We started with a beta product in 2014. We got our core team in place in 2015. 2016, whole of the year is about finding the product market fit. This year, we're going to be traveling to US, Europe, and Hong Kong and meet our clients. Our stuff is, we want to talk to 2,000 clients and figure out what they want from us, and then develop our product accordingly for them. And then 2017, we want to start scaling up our business. This is our customer acquisition plan. We start with the startups, colleges and universities. We charge startups €9. Colleges pay us €99. VC and private equity funds pay us $999. We just signed up with a government yesterday, one of the biggest and the most richest country in the world. They're signing us up for their startups globally. All the governments are today running accelerator programs globally. So we are signing up with some of these large institutions. And that's the journey in which we'll acquire our customers. We're enjoying the journey. We were at Surge. We have been selected for Collision in US. We have been selected for Rise in Hong Kong and Web Summit. We get about 750,000 monthly impressions. We've grown in our Elixir traffic by 8 times in the last 5-6 months. We are the world's fastest job search. If you go to our website, you will possibly find a job for you if it fits you. In less than 5 to 10 milliseconds, because our search is hosted on 18 servers globally. This is our team. We are spread across the world. Mithika works out of South Africa. Abhishek is immigrating to Ireland. I work out of India. And Aditya, our CFO, is based in Qatar. It just helps us connect to startups globally. That's it from my side.
So, 9, you said €9
A year.
per year. How do you make that affordable?
I didn't get your question.
How do you make that? I mean, how do you make that for you? How do you make money?
We actually ran our numbers very well. We ran our LTV and the CAC ratio. The challenge is if you automate stuff, you can still make money doing it. See, look at it this way: if I set up a direct sales team, I'm still going to burn cash. I'm keeping €9. It's a semi-freemium plan. I've kept €9 because I don't want everybody to come in. Plus, I need a bit of data about who's coming on my platform. Once they pay me through a PayPal or a banking channel, at least their KYC is done. So my cost of acquiring a customer is not too high because I can suddenly churn in a lot of customers, and in 2 to 3 years, once I have a community, then we can figure out what more do they need. Because our closest competitors and others are still 100x, so there is a lot of opportunity to expand the margin if we have an emotional space with them. I'll give you an example. In Surge, there were 400 participants. We made 1,000 banners for them in 2 days. Everybody at Surge in Bangalore said, "Oh, it was not good. Paddy, you didn't do it right." We were so happy. We had 150 plus signups. You know why? Because we connected with each one of them at least 5 times before the event. Uh, I've come and spoken to a lot of you, Abhishek's here. So what we do is whenever we go to an event, we ensure that we get in more and more people on board. And once we are doing with the colleges, if you have a large base, then you can build up the revenue pyramid on top of it. Plus colleges, just look at the number of colleges, how much money they're spending on placements. It's such a big pain. Students are not ready to be placed. You're teaching them entrepreneurship. How about experiencing entrepreneurship using a life project globally? So we're going to approach a lot of colleges, and our plan is €99 a year, which is less than the price of the hailing a cab in some of the cities for a day.
How many candidates do you have in your platform?
Candidates.
Or job seekers?
Uh, we don't promote people to do CVs with us because we say we are a live platform. Two reasons for that: because we firmly believe that we shouldn't aggregate and sell personal data, and that's the reason we are incorporated in Ireland where the privacy laws are tough. But we make about 400 introductions to companies every week.
So you said you have 7 million impressions, right?
750,000 impressions, which includes the social media and our web. Our web gets about 200 or 250,000, including Facebook, Twitter, and everything else. We add up to.
Are you already exploring the media route, like the ad network, advertising on the website?
See, I'm not very keen on burning money on the Google ad because
No, I'm saying the other way around. People to come and advertise on your site. And
I'm not very keen on the advertisement part because I still firmly believe a business has to pay for its own business rather than making money through something else. And that's why we've kept the ad off. That's a rainy day saving. If things get too tough in 3, 4, 5 years down the line, we want to build a business and build a model which can be scalable and it should be able to stand up on its feet. So ad, you can, even if we monetize today on ad, we'll make about 200,000 rupees or like $5,000-6,000 a month. But that's not the real business. Our real business is getting money from the colleges and these startups, because then we lose focus.
So I find it very interesting. So you got this bunch of potential startup employers, right?
Yeah.
So on the employer side, €9 is not much at all.
Less than price of
So
coffee.
I mean, honestly, everybody should sign up. Now the thing is that how do you keep them active, and how do you check if this is not just becoming like a people sign up for a year, they forget about you, they don't use it. It's not like a monthly subscription that you can keep seeing renewals. In that regard, what's your annual renewal rate for the €9?
We still haven't got to an annual renewal rate, but you had a very interesting question. Because we're working with early stage startups, they definitely have a lineup of projects which they want completed in a year. What's the option? Go and pick up an intern, which is again a very costly process. You go there and do that. So they have a lineup of projects. Now they cannot outsource sales. They cannot outsource coding. They shouldn't be running that startup if they're doing it. They have to do it themselves. But there are projects in digital marketing, social media, consumer research, consumer feedback, UI, UX. So we work with the startup when they're starting up with us to put up a kind of what's their need in the year. Fundraising is getting tough, which is so great. Why? Because people are going to look at doing things in a real way. And once you put up that plan, then you say, okay, you need a UI, UX is a big effort for you. We're going to go to 6 great colleges in the world. send us your PPT, send us your stuff, we will make a home page for you. We give every company a page. We'll make up a page for you, and then we'll work through the college to get you the best applicants in that field. So the applicants, apply to them directly, but they're very engaged because we are solving a real problem for them, and we don't, as on date, we don't want to do 6-month light projects with any employer because it doesn't help the students, and it is about the labor arbitrage. We want them to do 1.5 month project, and then they are coming back to us. And if the startup is going to die, he's not going to come. But if they're living and they're working, they're able to crowdsource their problem to a lot of people. So currently, we have about 900 plus live projects, 900 to 1,000. On an average, each company gives about 5 to 6 projects, and then they pace it out because we go back and ask them, how will you monitor it? How will you do it? Our challenge has been to put up a framework because pink is not pink in every part of the world, right? There are different shades of pink. So we want to put up a structure and say, define your problem, what you want the students to do. The student should be able to submit in a particular format. So once you standardize, then they can move on to the next one.
And this is more projects, it's not employment, it's not full-time.
No, on our job portal, you can put it for live jobs. You can do everything. We make 400 introductions for live jobs. Yeah. That's
And the whole coordination which you do between the university and that particular employer, isn't that very hands-on? I mean, isn't there a tech way to solve for all that? Because you're not charging enough to...
Yeah, we're solving it because we can't throw people at problem because our product doesn't allow that kind of a leverage. So one of the stuff to do is appoint campus Bs. So in Delhi, what we did is we've gone to 2 colleges and we picked up students who will be the campus Bs there. And you want to find a student who is very, very entrepreneurial, plus at the same time wants to help the community. And these people pick up work for 6 months, and using a filter, you transmit the jobs to those students because students are going to make their profiles on the platform, and then they should only get the opportunity what is relevant to them. There's a lot of noise transmission. That's what we're working on to get it more accurate. Maybe something what Quint did for media, right? How do you relay the right stuff to the right person?
Hello, I'm Minakshi Jain, and with me is Aditya Halan, who takes care of our technology. I'm here to represent Helper for You, which is trying to simplify the hiring at the bottom of the pyramid. So Helper for You is trying to do what Naukri.com maybe did to me when I was younger, about 20 years back. It made job search easy for me. I'm trying to do the same for people at the bottom of the pyramid, could be the cook, driver, maids, ayahs, etc. We are not into the service space, we are into direct hiring kind of space. So the problem is this. A maid or a uneducated, unskilled or semi-skilled person at the bottom of the pyramid has no networking, how to find jobs. And the problem is there not only for someone like a maid, but it could be also there for someone like a driver, a delivery boy, an uneducated dropout from school, any of those people. So where do they go and find the job? On the other hand, someone like me, if I need to find a maid, my maid doesn't come today. I need to hire a new maid. I need to find a driver. Where do I go to find that? So right now what we do is we'll talk to the neighbors, we'll maybe tell the security guard, or we'll find some other networking opportunity to find this helper. So there's a need for a helper and there's a need for a job. But both the parties don't know how to connect with each other. The only thing that we found in common with both of them was a mobile phone. And what we have tried to do is use a mobile phone to connect the 2 parties to make the job search easier for the 2 sides. How we do this is, okay. Alright, so the video is not working here, otherwise there was a live demo. What happens is someone like Akantavai would register on my site through my call center. She just calls in or she registers to the team in a slum. Once she's on the site becomes just like an OLX. So you can search the site using different filters which are available. It could be the city, who are you looking for, what is the working time that you wanted, gender, education, experience, and other such filters are there. Once you choose using those filters, you get a short list of people. who might be of interest to you. And these people, you can also look at them from the date of registration. So for example, someone who has just registered 2 days back is still available in the job market. That's the person that you would be calling first of all. So you look at those people, you register on the site, you get the phone number, you call Kantabai directly. If all goes well between you two, you can just hire Kantabai without any middleman, any agency, or anyone else coming in between. So you get more options. If there's a direct connect, there's faster hiring. For example, I need someone in my house broke a bone today and I need to go to office tomorrow. How do I leave that person home alone? I need a patient care. I don't have time to go to an agency. I just use Helper for You, look at 10 patient care people there, call them, hire the one whoever is available, and I'm ready to go to work. So it's cost and time effective solution for everyone. Now, the competition that we have is, one is the offline agencies which have mushroomed all over cities. Second is agencies which have become online but which are still working with their own intervention. Someone like a Book My Buy, which is an online platform now, but still you hire through someone at Book My Buy. And the third is someone who's trying to do an online platform but is not really focusing on the domestic segment. So we focus on domestic and blue collar helpers. And the second bigger differentiation is we are doing everything using a mobile now, because when I look at the poor, unskilled, semi-skilled people, only way I can get them into the digital world is using their mobile phones. So that is what we have used. So my maid has a mobile phone. She registers by calling into us. The job giver has a mobile phone. She calls the job seeker using the mobile phone. Both of them connect only through the mobile phone. Nothing else is needed. So some numbers here which we have taken from some quarterlies, these are not, we have not been able to find very recent numbers, they are a little old, but that should give you some idea about the size of the market that we have. So 6 crore urban households in 2007 and expected to grow 8 times by 2027. On an average, at least 50% will employ at least one domestic helper, at least one. There are multiple. There's a driver, there's a babysitter, there's a buy, there's a cook, there's a patient care. Multiple people are being hired now. Similarly, you have SMEs who hire people like delivery boys, which is big in demand right now. Delivery boys, housekeeping staff, peons, security guards, again patient care, all that is there. If I look at the job seeker population, there are people who are within the metros who are looking for jobs. There's someone in Bangalore who's looking for a job, but then there's also a migrant who comes into the city and look for a job. And the data says that there are 2 crore migrants who moved from rural to urban areas in 2011. And more than 60% of the migration was looking for employment. So how does this migrant population get job? Right now what happens is a migrant comes into a city like Bombay, stays on the road or stays with someone else looking for a job. With this platform, you can actually register before you move into a town. By the time you are in a town, or even before that, you start getting job calls, and that has worked. We have had ladies from Nasik, from Akola getting registered on a platform for a live-in job. They did not have to spend a single day on the streets of Bombay. They came to Bombay, they got a job the same day, and they started working in Bombay. So the current stage of business is we launched in August 2014. Since then, we have been active in Mumbai and Pune. We started very small with a small segment, small part of Mumbai, which is called Powai. And then we went live with, in Mumbai and Pune within the next 6 months. We have approximately 5,000 visitors coming to the site currently. Clients have been calling us from various parts. It's not only household but small restaurants which need waiters, cooks, delivery boys, etc. Then we have businesses like Logicash, etc. All these service providers have started hiring from our platform, and we have inquiries from all over areas. Similarly, from the job givers, we had about 2,500 people registered over a year. but we have doubled that number, nearly doubled that number in the last 3 months. We have people who are getting registered from all over India, but mainly from Maharashtra. Till now, we have been having a very lean team structure. We have just used posters and contact programs in slums to register the job seeker. Minimal online marketing for the paying customer. No offline marketing at all, and that is what we need to do now. The roadmap is we need to go deeper into current areas of operation, create more supply of helpers, invest in offline marketing. In the last 1 year, we have got a lot of recognition. We won the Innovation Challenge Award by Facebook, Internet.org. We were part of the Business Accelerator program and also the Hot 100 Days to Grace Awards. And that is our team. Any questions?
I think you're solving a very big need. Niren, you can start.
Yeah, of all the jobs, I'm just curious, which category are you, placing the most jobs for? Secondly, do you do any sort of, I just want to understand your value addition. And lastly, what is the traction?
Right, so that video which did not run, that would have shown, I
No
could see
worries,
what
no
you are coming, where you are coming from. We are focusing more on the domestic segment, and that is where we started with, which we actually started as madeforyou.com. Then what happened was men would come to us and say, why are you helping only women? We also need jobs. And then Made for You became Helper for You. So we say anyone who has not completed graduation, zero education to undergraduation, can register on our site. And the value add that we are doing is, one, we are listing the people available for you in your area. We are doing verification for them. Aadhaar card verification is being done. We have tied up with a third party to authenticate the Aadhaar card also. If there's any other add-on police verification, etc., you want to get done, someone to visit the homes, etc., we can do that at an additional cost for them. So that is it.
So, largely maids.
No, not only maids, it's in a house you would have a maid. For example, I need to go to a party tonight, I need a babysitter.
No, I understood
Yeah.
what your this
Yeah.
is. I'm saying, where is the traction today?
Traction is coming from live-in maids and full-day maids, most.
Okay.
And patient care, and from the businesses, the delivery boys. That's huge in demand now.
You said somewhere you've done 5,000 job seekers and 720
No,
for,
okay, 4,000 job seekers,
and about 720 even on your.
700 hired so far
Okay.
out of that.
So that's
5,000.
and you seem to be doing very well in the last couple of months. etc.
Couple of months, because we launched in August 14. Since then, the platform kept getting updated. We launched the alpha version and then we updated it. Mobile app was launched.
Okay.
So and people don't really. It was a very disruptive kind of an idea for me to call a maid to hire her. I'm not used to that. So it took that much time. But now people have started. We have had repeat customers coming back to us using the platform again and again. Now we just need some more visibility.
How is this different from like the Baba jobs and some of those guys?
Okay, so that's a question that's often asked. So Baba, right? So I received a mailer from Baba Jobs last week. I could not find domestic maid anywhere on that mailer. So even though Baba Jobs says it does that segment, I think it's more on the B2B kind of a platform rather than a B2C and the domestic segment.
Okay, great. Okay, one quick thing, guys, everyone, that I'm writing copious notes on my mobile phone. So if you see me on the phone, it's because I'm writing notes and not doing my email. Because I just basically I use the notes. I have like 1,000 startups here, which I sync, and then I sort of like to track it. So just,
I'd like to
being
see
very
you on
clear.
that. I was the same,
Yeah.
along with some WhatsApp. So one more thing was that you said that mobile has been given to the maids. And
No, we have not given. We are saying
They all-
everyone has a mobile
but,
nowadays.
But do they have smartphones? I mean, how
You
does
don't
that-
need a
in
smartphone.
Java-based phone.
You need a normal 1000
Now
wala
you
phone
can-
also
now you can
works.
try the Freedom 251.
Yeah, I'm hoping that
You,
comes
you
out.
get the charger for sure.
How do you make money? Who pays you?
The job giver, if you want to look at see what happens is you can see the profile, all the details, experience, education, etc. To get the phone number, you pay us.
Do you believe, so on the maid's part, probably slightly safer from a household point of view and so on, but how do you
what are your thoughts about the security risk overall and the impact that it could have on the way? Or how are you trying to minimize the risk of that playing out over a longer tenure?
Okay, so interestingly, even though we advertise, we say, we blog, we write that when you hire someone, please do police verification, we'll help you do it. No one has so far approached us for that. They say, even in our day to day life, we don't do that. If you are even saying that you have an Aadhaar card that is there, it gives them a comfort level. So that is it. But what we plan to do now is we are launching an app soon, which will be like a manage your helpers kind of an app where you can record everything about your helpers. So at least we are going to force the customer to start looking at the ID proofs, etc. And it's a long-term vision that we will have a similar kind of an app which can be installed with the police stations. So every time you have someone here, the local, the society or the police station or someone gets synced with that. So that way you will be able to manage that much better.
I'll also add on to that a bit. What we did is typically when we are adding a maid or a person on board, we are doing a lot of verification. We are doing a physical call first of all, taking the verification number and getting it verified by the UID. So by that we are at least verifying the address is perfect and the numbers are perfect. And then the person who is visiting is always meeting. So you are hiring a helper, you'll always meet them physically and then only hire. So that coordination we are building now.
Surely, you're solving a great need, but I'm just trying to understand if you have to scale up the business, it's an e-commerce space of sorts. Land grabbing, where you have put in money, if some of the VCs put you money, you can't advertise because none of your guys from the other side, like from the maid. And how do you get those database more? Because everybody needs a maid, right? But how do you get those people, more and more?
So you're talking about the employer? Or
Talking about
the
the
jobs
employee.
employee.
Yeah.
So we actually go to the slums. We conduct our workshops in slums. We tell them about this service. Okay, next thing is my background is actually from an e-learning professional. So we used to do a lot of e-learning using WhatsApp for sales teams. So I want to start using the same model to start doing some soft skills training for this bottom of the pyramid to upskill them also. And as we start doing that, then to be on my platform will become an aspirational level for them. So their 251 rupees mobile phone, I'm really hoping for that. So
And just tell me one thing, what is the vision? What is like in the next 5 years? What kind of a volume will you reach? In terms of monetary numbers, in terms of hiring or whatever.
So, frankly speaking, I've not thought about 5 years
1 year?
down now. So, 1 year we were hoping that we should actually be becoming the platform of choice for anyone looking to hire. So, if I say on an average, a person would be spending about 500 rupees on a helper, on hiring a helper in a year. Last year we did a lakh rupees, even though our numbers were not too great. So, we should be going up at least doubling every quarter. And then it becomes viral as soon as we go to other cities. We are still in Bombay and Pune only. So, first short term goal is to go to different cities now.
Great. At least you're solving a very big social need. Any other questions, Judy? No? Yeah. Great. Thank you so much.
So, so after the break, I hope to make it more exciting for you. Okay, so MyRefers basically is a platform that uses external referrals. We've all been used to hiring using internal reference from employees. But what we've done with MyRefers is we've said, why should referrals be limited to internal employees when actually you can use people's connections to actually get you the best candidate. And what we've done is we've combined cognitive technology with external referrals to basically build a platform which we believe is game changing the recruitment space. If you know the recruitment space, right, India is about $1 billion market size. Globally, it's about 412 billion permanent recruiting as a market. And today, the most amazing thing is that 90% of this market is today owned by the staffing companies or the HR consultants. And only about 10% of this market is owned by the job board. So in India, if you look at it, Naukri, Monster, LinkedIn, Shine, everybody put together just makes about 10% of this entire revenue. The 90% of revenue is actually made by the HR consultants. And the reason for that is purely because the HR consultants are able to give you some quality, which typically none of the online platforms are able to give you, because you get a lot of junk, a lot of uninterested, irrelevant profiles from the job boards. And the consultants help you filter those profiles up
and give you a selected set of good profiles. And that's why companies pay them money and they make 90% of this revenue, which means almost 960 million of this market is actually owned by the consultants. Good thing is this is an industry which is growing massively with a lot of startups like you hiring, a lot of MNCs actually ramping up in India, and India as a market itself, the GDP growing at a big rate. This is an industry which is really growing. And typically today, three issues that typically are there in the industry is that while the job boards will give you a lot of profiles, but they'll give you a lot of low quality, irrelevant profiles. The HR consultants will give you candidates, but the truth of the matter is they also go back to the job board, source the profiles from them, just filter those 7, 8, 10 profiles and give it to you. So basically at any moment of time, even the consultants are able to give you just about 7, 8% of the total base of the entire population, because that's the active base which is on the job boards applying for jobs and looking for jobs. The remaining 90% of the base, there's no way to reach out to them because we are all in our jobs, and typically we only act if somebody reaches out to us or a friend tells us that, hey, there's a job for you to do. So there's no way to reach out to passive candidate. And finally, I think the third big problem is that we never get the people on time. When we want to hire, there's always an issue of getting people, right? It's never there. And if you are an HR inside a company, you really know that there's such a painful process because there'll be multiple sources giving you multiple applications, and to filter and read those out itself is a pain in itself. So what we're doing through MyRefers is solving these three issues. We're solving the issue of quality, where we build an AI-based recommendation engine. The passive profile base, we're using people's social connections, email connections, phone book connections to help companies hire. And the third thing is we are helping companies get these things happening faster through a marketplace-based approach where everything is integrated. So what is it? What does the platform do? So typically, like a marketplace, right? In our case, the companies actually form the buyer segment, looking to hire that talent which they want. The seller segment is actually made up of three kinds of people. There are individuals referring friends which are connected to them on social, on email, and on their phone book, right? The second part of a referral network is a lot of HR consultants. Now, HR consultants are used to sourcing profiles, so we anyway allow them to source profiles and get it on the platform. But the most amazing thing is that if you know an HR consultancy, right, they typically would, if there are about 10 to 15 people have been existent for 3 years, they would have a few lakh CVs lying with them, and they have no tools to basically mine them. If somebody was able to give them tools like NLP and text analytics to mine those CVs, that whole amount of passive base would come onto a platform, right? So the second part of the referral network is this whole HR consultant base, their own databases. And the third one is the HR freelancers. Again, they have a lot of source profiles and they have a lot of connections. What we do through technology is actually help them mine their own bases. So to an individual who's on the platform, we're able to tell, hey, Lalit, there's a friend of you called Amit who could really fit into this job well using all the social data scraping that we do. Why don't you refer him and in turn get rewarded for it? So every job that is posted on the platform, companies actually put a reward to it, and that reward actually gets shared with the referral base. Similarly to an HR consultant, while he can source profiles and put on the platform, we also mine his own database. So the few lakh CVs that he has, he almost uses like a Dropbox thing, dumping it into a platform. Using NLP and text analytics, we are able to recommend to him that within your base, possibly these are the candidates you can reach out to, and why don't you reach out to them to get an updated profile and put it back into the system. And same with the freelancers. Once the application comes in, we actually further rank those applications on 3 different parameters. So one, we do a skill and an experience score. So when we actually take JDs from the companies, right, we realize there's a massive difference between the JD that is to the hiring that is needed. Because the hiring manager defines what is needed and the JD is made by the HR person. And there's a huge gap. So what we've done is we've said that it's okay to give us JDs, but along with the JDs, give us some CTQs or critical to quality hiring parameters which can define what you need. So assuming you're hiring an Android developer, you can say that I need an Android developer who's worked on consumer apps, who single-handedly built an app and has not been a part of the large team. He's not someone who's built on the OS side of the business, and someone who comes from a premium college, has got 2 years of experience. All those CTQs are what we're able to take, and basis that we do a skill match, skill and experience match. The second match we do is a culture match. Now this is very interesting. When we started, we asked companies, tell us what is the person who will fit in, basis the culture fit. And we realized there were a whole list of things that the companies would say. When we actually started to mine data of their current employees, we realized it was not the same. So instead of asking companies what the culture match is, we basically go and look at companies' current employees with the same roles, scrap that data, match those attributes with the attribute of the applicant and further rank that application. And the third thing that we do on the matching bit is basically we look at a trust score. We look at who's referred who. Is this an Android guy referring another Android guy? Is this a colleague referring a colleague? Is it a boss referring a junior? Is it a classmate referring a classmate? And basis that, what we give to companies is a highly filtered list of these profiles. So we don't give them the entire profile set that comes in. We give them say about 8 profiles, out of which they're able to hire one. The challenge for us is how do we move from 8 to 5 to 3, and that is where our technology is basically focusing on. This is the team. So I'm part of the founding team. I used to be the VP of Star, and the idea of starting this was that when I was building businesses, whether it's Star or earlier, there's a whole pain in getting people. And I realized if hiring could be like marketing, that's a massive opportunity, and that's what we're trying to do with MyReference. Piyush is my co-founder, who is a Rich Pilani guy, used to be the chief architect at Let's Buy. Guna comes from eBay, Kashish comes from JP Morgan, and Dr. Sarabjit is a data science professor. What we are doing through MyReference is actually challenging every part of the value chain. So instead of JD facing, give us CTQs. Instead of focusing on the HR, we realize if you look at the HR roles in an organization, typically he or she literally passes the profile to the hiring manager. And we are saying, can we directly involve the hiring manager in the process rather than just depending on HR? So the other thing we are doing is we're saying, can we make it easy for the hiring manager to take decisions so that we can give them relevant profiles? Third thing, even the candidate workflow, we're completely doing it via an app. A lot of them interviews get fixed, candidates don't turn up. We are able to track that whether they'll come or not. To the consultants, we almost have a bidding system where they can bid for profiles and something that can give us profiles faster. So there are higher commissions paid if they're able to get us profiles faster. And of course, we've built a lot of NLP, text analytics-based tools and algos to do various predictions. I've spoken about the skill, trust, and the culture score. This is some of the technology bit. I can take you through it separately if you like. I think the bell is already rung. And this is how the platform actually looks like. So typically, you can literally get friend recommendations for a job, and you can literally refer a friend. There's a whole kind of stuff that tells you whether your profile will fit or not. And there's a reverse referral bit as well. This is the app we are building. We basically gamified the whole referral process. We can literally run campaigns at a community to say, hey, I need Android developers, can you refer? And there's a special reward for it. So we've made marketing happening here. For the ATS, which is supposedly a very complicated system by the big companies like Oracle and Microsoft, we've simplified it into a simple app, which is almost like Tinder-like. So the hiring manager literally sees a profile, has a percentage match and a few questions. If he likes it, he clicks on it. And if he wants to fix an interview, he does a right. If he doesn't want to fix an interview, he does a left. So the hiring manager decisions happen faster. The consultants, they're allowed to upload their entire base on the platform. This is what some of our clients tell about us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
There are a few more slides on numbers. If you like, I can take you through it separately.
Yeah.
So this quarter will be possibly having about 70 to 80 folks through the platform. We've already done about 50 in the first 2 months. So that's where we are. 50 people, about 15 to 18 crores of offers have already gone through the platform. We make a revenue of about 17 to 18 lakhs already. Our cost is about 20 lakhs, so almost on a mode where we can self-sustain. Our consultant base is about 250 plus HR consultants who use the platform. We've got about 3.5 million people profiles through all the network connections that we're able to build. We've got about 430 odd freelancers on the platform. So yeah, that's basically it.
So one question, Amit, are you looking towards more going towards LinkedIn, or are you looking towards more as a company which probably LinkedIn would be interested in?
So one thing that we're doing is that unlike all the job boards and LinkedIn, right, you need those 100 million people to register on the platform. We believe we should just get 2.5 million referrals on the platform. We'll be able to reach a base of about 100 million people, because through people's networks and databases, we'll be able to get to the entire population. So the growth hack for us is we don't need 100 million registrants on the platform to get to 100 million people. We just need about 2 million people on the platform to be able to get to 100 million.
Great. Any question?
Sorry? What's the business model? So business model right now is a very easy model. We tell companies we used to pay a certain commission to the consultants, pay that commission here. We keep a percentage of it and we pass the remaining money to the referral. So we earn good money per hire that we do. Typically at 8.33% is what companies used to pay to the consultant.
One of the things which I would kind of just give as feedback, we have a slide which shows some traction?
Actually, I think they're ringing the bell. I can show you the bell.
Quickly, this since Julie has asked.
So this is basically. So this is what I told about the job offers. 70. This is the revenue number. This is how we're growing on quarter. This is how our referral 5 days is actually increasing. So for the last 40.
Great. Thank you, Lalit. Thanks for this. Probably we could mail this presentation to the jury if you want.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hello, good afternoon everyone. My name is Mahesh Rathod and I'm an 18-year-old COO and co-founder of Vuzela. And he is Sahil Arora, the 17-year-old 11th grade student and CEO and founder of the same. Yeah. We are here to present ID, the product which we have recently come up with. ID is basically the world's first ever iris scanning technology, which is pure software. We do not require any type of hardware specification for that. Yeah. It's the accuracy rate, 99.6%, and it takes 2 sets of 5 seconds for the first time enrollment.
All right. Talking about the market, so basically iris recognition market has seen a huge growth in the past years, and it will in the coming years. As you can see, the sources say that it'll hit 3.2 billion by 2020. Please, yeah. So basically, the use cases which we found more prominent are application security. Then we have mobile wallets for eKYC purposes, and that's what we're working on currently. So basically, a few of our clients which we are working with, so basically it's like a value-added service, ID, in most of the devices which are coming out. So these people are launching new product chains, new product lines, basically, which will have an iris recognition software, our software installed within them. That will be used to unlock the phone, to make payments, for Play Store purchases, and etc. Right.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. So apparently about 90 million of Indians have an Aadhaar card these days, and there's a set limit of 10,000 rupees in a mobile wallet. To get that to 1 lakh, they need a eKYC check. They need a KYC check, right? So what we're doing is we're doing an exact standard same match which Aadhaar does of the iris. So basically we are capable of scanning the entire iris of a user by just using the software, whereas Aadhaar uses to do the same with the hardware. So apparently our first client in this space is FreeChart. What we're doing with them is actually we have integrated the technology in their platform. There's an eKYC tab, you go to it. If you need to increase your money limit, you simply scan your iris, the iris goes to the Aadhaar's database and it gets certified within 10 seconds and your limit gets increased to 1 lakh from 10,000. Right. And then we're also using it for access controls, the cheapest ever access controls, and that's the company we're working on this. Right. And yeah, we do believe in revenue. So basically we work on a very simple model. We license the software for a limited period of 2 years, and we take an upfront payment ranging from $100,000 to $150,000 per client. Yeah. And then we charge them monthly based on the usage or the volume. Right. And that's what we have raised so far. We have raised $100,000 for an equity of 10%, and that's what we're raising next for 20% of our equity. Right. That's it. Thank you. And you can get in touch with us for that. Yeah. For questions.
So actually, software or hardware, but like the algorithm will be the same, right? So are you depending on the resolution of the image itself?
It's basically dependent solely on the image processing which we do. So apparently the algorithms are mostly the same, but then we also have tweaked a bit with the algorithm of the hardware. And apparently it's basically, as I said, it's mostly the image processing part which plays the role in this whole iris scanning, where you naturalize and segment the iris and then you provide it to Aadhaar.
So true, but like, are you using anything advanced like Bloom filter techniques to kind of actually identify specific areas within the iris, which is very similar to what other people do?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
We do that.
So how do you protect that? Like, because this is pretty standard stuff, right? Someone else can actually come in and do the same thing, or the same OEMs that you're licensing to.
See, yeah. As I talk about iris, what we do is in one of these, yeah, just a sec. Okay, so basically in this slide it explains that, we're not only scanning the iris, we're scanning your entire eye, and this part comes in the device space. So apparently in the device in the device space, that's okay. So apparently in the device space, what we do is we scan the entire eye instead of your iris, and that is how the security works in the device front. But as for Aadhaar space, if you talk about where we scan the iris for Aadhaar, so what it does is it is transferred to Aadhaar in a secured server, which is the client server, and then it comes back with only a yes or no verified response. So the entire data is protected, and so that it can't be intercepted. High levels of security.
So that piece I understand. I mean, you'll have to do it anyway.
Right.
Anytime you're actually doing any verification check, you'll have to encrypt it and send it. I'm kind of more curious as to, are you taking, as you're doing this like device-oriented kind of uncheckout or like authentication, are you actually taking the shape of the eye, some other features around the eye, or it's just like the eye and the iris?
Inside, so basically, what we, that. So that's the image which we capture of the eye, and then we further segment it so we only get the iris, and then that's how the entire process flow works.
Okay, so I think it's not too different from.
Well,
why do you say it's the first of its kind?
It's world's first ever because you haven't actually seen a software which has the capability of scanning your iris, and apparently this works on any camera of any device, be it a VGA 2.
So any resolution.
Any resolution would do.
And you're using standard algorithms.
Standard algorithms.
Okay. So I'm going back to my first question. Can it be emulated by the
Sorry?
OEM? Will the OEM guys emulate it as opposed to keep on paying your licenses?
Mm-hmm. I didn't have a question.
The question is simple. Today you are licensing it for 100K, 150K a pop. Say tomorrow, like Samsung says, I can actually do a better thing.
Pending patent.
Huh?
I've already filed for a patent on this.
You have filed, you have not got it.
Yeah, but still.
And you say it's standard algorithms.
Right. Sorry?
Have you licensed it to?
Yeah, we've licensed it to. Okay, so we've licensed it to 4 clients currently. 3 of them are in the device space, and 1 of them is in the mobile wallet space. So in the mobile wallet space, we just did one in the morning at Freecharge's office. So in the mobile space, we have licensed it to Gioni, Vertu, and then there's this company called Smartron, which are launching their mobile chain this by the end of March. So those are the 3 clients which works in the device space. And for mobile wallets, we have Freecharge. So we have in the mobile wallet, we charge them $150,000 upfront, and in the device space, we charge them $100,000 for one, and that's the upfront which we take. And in the mobile space, what it works is that we charge them per device. Yeah.
What inspired you to get into this space?
Basically, I was I was much fascinated with tech. So I was at the age of 13, I was an iOS developer. By the age of 14, I was Android. And at 15th, I thought I'll just start up a software development company. I started Vuzela Group, which is a limited company now. And yeah, thanks. So then at the age of 16, finally, I was building a social network app, which I wanted to beat Facebook, so I was building that. We're still building that. In that, what we were doing is we were kind of replacing passwords with a new method. So we came up with an eye scan technology where we could, use your iris as your password. So that's how we started creating the technology, and within 1 month, we formed a team of 15 for this particular unit, and then we finished it and we reached here. Right. Right. Thank you.
CLAP is an online platform that connects travelers and expats in the city to local classrooms for a cultural exchange conversation. We actually bring the world into the classroom. Let's start with a little story about Alia. She's a 12-year-old hardworking girl in a private school in Mumbai. For her world and her role of a mother is to cook and clean at home, what she knows about foreign cultures through the American movies and TV shows that she sees. But suddenly one day, Charlotta, a tourist from Finland, enters her classroom and talks to her about her life back in Finland, how it snows for most of the year, how her brother's a great chef at home, how the northern lights take up the sky. And suddenly Alia's worldview begins to change. All students want this exposure, but how much access do they have to this? Travelers themselves are looking for such meaningful cultural exchanges, but they don't have access to schools. So CLAP is giving them a whole new access to schools. Okay, unfortunately, I think there's a problem with the videos. I'm going to move ahead and try playing the videos. I think we're ready to go. The videos are not going to play. Should I take it from the top again? Or should I just continue? We can continue? Okay. Yeah, I know there are too many. All right. So, as I gave you Alia's story to explain and also the traveler's point of view, This is our website. So what the travelers have to do is they sign up, create their profile, put in their dates. Schools sign up, create their profile, and put in their available dates. And CLAP will match the two for a 1-hour CLAP talk in the school. When they sign up for a CLAP talk, each of them gets a CLAP kit, the school and the traveler. And this CLAP kit is based on tools to make the conversation easier, and it is based on a theory of change. This is the change we envision to see in the children with regular exposure to different cultures. This has been created in hand with Amnesty International, working with United Nations at the Human Rights of Education, and our CLAP team consisting of educators, psychologists, and curriculum setters. What does the world have today for cultural exchange? IB school fees, exchange programs, not even 0.01% students can avail of these. And what do they give you? 1 or 2 cultures a year at the max. This is what CLAP gives a child. 24 friends across the world in just your primary years. Okay. That was a quote by a principal saying that we can't take the children everywhere in the world, so we have to bring the world into the classroom. And we had a bite by an actual traveler who was actually a founder for Scroll.in, Jennifer O'Brien from US, who's talking about how she's absolutely delighted to take this entire experience. And she couldn't stop smiling.
I'm Neha Motwani from Fraternity. To actually give you a 10,000 square feet overview of what we're trying to do at Fraternity, Fraternity is an enabler of all things fitness. Basically, we represent a platform which helps the user through the entire fitness journey point by point, starting with where it begins. So looking at discovery, looking at booking, purchase, and also playing in the other ecosystem elements that are stemming out of personalization. Second, in terms of discovery. And third, looking at the marketplace and also post-purchase engagement. So let me explain this further by giving an example of how a typical user's journey operates with respect to fitness. So let's say, Ruchir is actually trying to get fit and he's actually wanting to figure out where to start and where to begin. What would typically happen is that, old behavior, right, is to ask friends and family, is to research, is to go on to, let's say, a Just Dial, get the information, physically visit these different places and find out about their timing, schedule, look at what works for them, look at which fitness form he should actually go for. And ultimately it results in two things, right? Either he takes a non-informed decision and starts working out somewhere and then eventually doesn't actually follow through and the gym makes a lot of money in that bargain. And second is that he just forgets about fitness because everything else takes over in life. Enter new behavior, right? So Ruchi says that he wants something in Bandra, in let's say Bombay. He's looking for yoga, right? So he actually selects yoga and the location that he is present in, which could be his office or his home location. What he then gets are parameterized listing details, which would mean that if he actually wants to filter through and understand, can he get Iyengar yoga with a budget of under 2,000 rupees at home or at a studio, which basically gives him a free trial and has parking facility. He's actually able to get all the details. And then post then is actually where the magic happens for a platform like Fraternity. He's able to book trials. So he can actually book unlimited trials till he figures out the right option. So as a user, you can try different fitness forms through Fraternity. When you enter the funnel and we actually guide you through the entire process. So Ruchir will actually get details about what is Iyengar yoga, what is this studio that he's going to, what to carry, what to expect, a Google pin of where he's actually about to go, the person that he's meeting, to ensure that he's actually activated in the entire membership and the whole trial process. What he experiences at the service provider would be a VIP trial, which is something that is a SLA-driven work that the service provider will do for Fraternity in terms of giving a great trial experience. And post that, the purchase is something that Fraternity actually comes into the picture. We will curate a list of options. Now, what are the kind of options we're talking about? We're not just talking about fitness in terms of working out, right? We're also talking about fitness in terms of different forms of fitness, right? It could be yoga, Zumba, Pilates, martial arts, marathon training. It could be healthy eating, right? So we're actually also aggregating healthy meal subscriptions. We're aggregating kids fitness. We're aggregating in the future, sports facilities. So the idea is how can he come to one platform, get all the details. His entire process is mapped out from trial to purchase, and then he's able to purchase the membership. After he's purchased the membership, he's actually also using Fraternity to track his fitness journey, to actually see how many classes he has done, what kind of impact is it having on his fitness goals? Is he actually achieving his fitness goals? And then post that, actually either go for other fitness services, which are like, let's say, a healthy meal subscription. He could actually even combine and say, I want to do 3 days of yoga and I want to do 3 days of martial arts, and then keep continuing his fitness journey. So that's a gist about what we're trying to do at Fraternity. Jam can now talk about the growth and what we've seen in the past.
So building on from where Neha left off, I would want to talk about our commercial engagement with our service partners. So currently we are working on a listing and commission on transaction model. So a gym working with Fraternity would be paying an X amount to activate their account, and parallelly we would monetize every transaction, be it the first transaction as well as the renewal or repeat consumption for the same brand. What I think that gives us is a clear advantage when it comes to the supply side. We're generating 5x plus revenue for our service provider, and I think that is substantial looking at the fitness landscape today. Because the way we look at it, fitness as an industry in India is evolving. As we move forward, it's going to get more and more mature. More products are going to come into the horizon, and that gives us also a perspective where we could experiment with new products, both for the consumer as well as the service provider. And the growth for us has been phenomenal. We are currently active in 4 cities today. We are enjoying 2 lakh unique visitors on the website every month. 6,000 people every month pursue their fitness memberships through Fraternity, with a transaction value of 30 lakhs as per today. These numbers have obviously been accelerated basis the investment raise of $1 million that we did in the month of July. And the idea now moving forward is to focus on 3 major components. The first, and I think the most important, is the product. Trying to, both on the consumer as well as the supply side, on the consumer side, trying to add more stickiness to the website, post-purchase engagement, trying to further control the journey of the fitness consumer through the app. Parallelly, on the service provider side, we are trying to build a robust platform which will actually help them track, monetize leads further, and have a more robust way of ensuring information feeds through to aggregators. So that's one. Second, what we would want to focus is on further building out the categories that we have. As Neha said, entering adjacent categories in the fitness horizon and further accelerating customer acquisition in those categories. And thirdly, what we would want to now venture into is new demographics. Target markets where we already have presence in terms of our current supply chain, and more suppliers that we would want to add moving forward.
Which has gone up by 50% from October to January. Number of trials booked from October to January is not kept at the same pace. What would you describe that to?
So during the month of January, which we all know is a New Year resolution, fitness being the top of that list, we actually initiated a campaign called Fitmania, which was the largest campaign with respect to fitness memberships being sold at discount. So as low as 99 rupees for 1 month of membership across all brands of the country. What really did this was what happened through this is users started booking and buying memberships more than doing trials. So our February numbers are on track. We're about at 3,500 trials for the month.
So the intent of this campaign was also to integrate 1,000 service providers, giving them a platform through which they could push forward those January offers, which they would ideally want to, and was also to experiment that would an Indian consumer look at purchasing a membership if he is given complete information about that membership without taking a trial. So 3,000 users actively pursued the membership directly without actually going for a trial and then purchasing the membership.
You also track the drop-off rates on memberships sold?
Yeah, we do.
How does that track over the last?
So just sharing some numbers. If I will look at someone like a Talwarkars, the average dropout annually is 79%. What we've seen is that if I take a sample set of 100 users which have transacted first time through Fraternity, we've seen that 40% of them have renewed their membership. And the way we look at renewing membership is not about renewing a membership at a brand, but it's renewing with fitness. So we're saying that we want to keep the user warm enough, keep him integrated in a manner that he is pursuing his fitness goals, and post completion of his membership, he could either continue with the particular brand or move on to other brands as per his choice.
So that 40% includes all the other brands as well, right?
Yes.
So what kind of initiatives? Sorry, what kind of initiatives do you run that keep the member engaged, either at a particular gym or another?
Right. So the entire ecosystem is when user enters the funnel by saying that he actually wants to pursue fitness, right? What we do is basically we give him an option which is concierged by someone, which says that Ruchir, if you're actually looking at a combination of weight loss and flexibility, why don't you try so and so out, right? So the engagement begins at a concierge level. It goes on to say that when I'm doing a trial, T-2 is when I get all the details about the trial. T+2, which is, post the trial, I actually get to know what are the kind of membership options that I have, what can I combine it with. After I have started with my membership, which is something that you've purchased through Fiternity, the user then gets to, share about the feedback mechanisms in terms of how is his membership going at that particular gym. In the future, what we look at doing is integrating his entire journey, which is tracking how many cardio sessions does he do, how many weight loss sessions does he do on the app. So he checks in with the app and says that I have actually reached Gold's Gym, right? We are gamifying the entire experience from there in terms of how much ever he uses Fiternity and fitness services more and more. He actually starts from becoming, he starts with a fit nut, moves on to be a fit pro and a fit king and so on and so forth. So there are several elements built in with respect to engagement. Content, being one of them, and second being gamification.
Yeah, so I would just want to add one more thing to it. The way we look at it, the fitness journey starts with purchasing a membership, right? What we feel is that moving forward, as she rightly put it, content is one arm. The other arm is products. Today, if I buy a gym membership, I will need a gym bag. I will need maybe a protein shake moving down the line. So we are also aggregating options in a manner that as he moves forward with his gamification, attending X days of his membership, he gets coupons to now look at the localized protein shake provider and get it facilitated from.
Are you also adding a social element to all this?
Yes, we are. So in fact, now through the platform, you can actually add a fitness buddy. So when you're actually booking a trial, we would actually urge you, because 85% of the times when you actually add a fitness accountability partner or a buddy, the chances of you actually meeting your fitness goals increases by 85%. So what we do is, as soon as you sort of enter the platform, there is a sort of a referral to add a friend, and then going forward, the idea would be to actually socialize the entire process of not only in terms of how a user is able to challenge himself, but also add others into the challenges that he's taking. So he could actually build a challenge of 100 days of CrossFit, and add his sort of corporate colleagues, add his friends and family into the challenge.
Great. So Ruchir is a fit man today. Supposing somebody goes into your funnel and he tries to take a gym membership. Now, what happens? Like, how are you priced very aggressively as opposed to you going directly with Talwarkars or Gold or whatever, or he comes to you? So how do you manage that? Because these guys give very deep discounting.
Absolutely.
There is sure.
So the idea is that when someone is looking at consuming a membership, the differential factor that Fiternity brings on the table is two things. One is in terms of ancillary value to the primary service. So if I am buying a gym membership at Snap, normally I would get that membership, but I buy it through Fiternity. I would also get 10 days of personal training plus say a diet session. Parallelly, we also ensure that the pricing on Fiternity would be 20% lower than what you would make directly. So today, again, Fitmania is a very clear example of this, where memberships were being sold at 4,000 rupees at a Snap or a Talwarkars. On the platform, they were being sold at anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000. So a clear 50% advantage on purchasing. Also, I think one major factor for Indians moving forward is flexibility of payment options. So today, a lot of service providers do not have the ability to collect payments on card and also deliver these memberships on EMI. So today, if I am looking at buying a niche membership, which is CrossFit, which is worth maybe 50,000 a year, I can split my payments. And that is something that flies very well with users.
Then already you have fitness products like a band and products for e-commerce.
Currently, our focus is completely on fitness services. The way we are looking at building this out, like I mentioned, was to first look at the services play, which is a very hyper-local play in terms of helping users discover, book, transact, and purchase. Adding to that is the post-purchase renewal, that we spoke about. What we intend to do is go hyper-local with respect to products. in a way that we list nutrition stores, sports stores, and a user, when he's gamifying his experience, gets vouchers to purchase protein shakes or gear in a hyper-local environment.
So how much money are you looking to raise now?
We raised 1 million
Yeah.
in our pre-series A round. We're raising to we're looking to raise 3 million now in our
Oh, great. Any questions, Julie? Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Now Ruchir should have a membership.